Do you think Canelo was truly, was he truly interested in fighting Jake Paul, or was he using Jake Paul? Was he using Jake
No.
Paul to get one more fight out of Turki Alalshikh?
I don't believe that. I've seen a few boxing writers, YouTube members, whatever, media members say that he was playing Jake Paul. I don't believe it. I think Canelo's in this for the money, and I think he's all about the money. The risk reward for fighting Jake Paul, I said this a couple of weeks ago, is very, very low. The risk is low. The reward is enormous. Why would you not want to fight Jake Paul for 100 million? Let's just throw that number out there. And no disrespect to Jake Paul, and I honestly mean this. It's easy work for Canelo. That's not, it's not a tough fight. I mean, he doesn't even have to go through a full camp. He could weigh in at 190 pounds, fight Jake Paul at 200 pounds and make 100 million for nothing. So I genuinely believe he was interested in fighting Jake Paul. I don't believe this thing about he was just trying to sort of, play the game, so to speak, and get another deal or a bit more money out of Turkey. I honestly don't believe that. I'm with that he was going to fight Jake Paul. He's going to make a load of money. And he didn't care what sort of hardcore boxing fans said. He would have said, look, guys, I've been doing this for 20 years. Look at my back catalogue. I fight everyone, but we're on the back 9 now. And I just want to make as much money as possible because I've done what I needed to do in the sport of boxing. He's only made a U-turn because the offer from His Excellency was so good, you couldn't turn it down. It was 4 fights. It's big money. It's guaranteed money. Whereas Jake Paul would have been 1. And then where does he go from there? So I think it was a real thing.
Well, it's a fascinating thing because I think Canelo comes out smelling like roses because they put it out, and I think it was leaked by the Riyadh season side to put it out to try to, I don't know, ruin the surprise, ruin the announcement. Because, I mean, even after the fact, Turkey was telling ESPN that he was putting out false information to try to distract people. But ultimately, they saw the reaction, and the reaction wasn't positive, right? They didn't want this. Yeah. His fan base did not want this. And so he could have gone the route of, hey, I'm going to shut this kid up once and for all. He's making a mockery of the sport. He beat up a legend. I'm going to kill him. And as we said, like, I asked you the question, I think it was last week. I asked you the question, like, what if? I'm asking you this question. Obviously, Canelo Alvarez was going to do whatever he wanted with Jake Paul. It was up to him whether this fight goes 3 rounds or 7 rounds or 2 rounds or 1 round or 10 rounds. It was up to him. There are levels to this. The gap between them is astronomical. But I don't believe for a second that he wasn't sincere in his intent to sign to fight Jake Paul because of the money. He's always said it. What? Payday, payday, payday. He has always said, 100%. Just pay me the most money and I will come fight for you. Even Eddie Hearn himself, who Eddie adores Canelo. He's his biggest fan. He has said he has no loyalty to anyone. His loyalty is to whoever is going to pay him the most amount of money. And so this idea in the aftermath that people are like, thank you, Canelo. I see these boxing, media guys, thank you, Canelo, for keeping your integrity and for saying no to Jake Paul and MVP.
Nonsense.
And for going,
absolute nonsense.
He just got paid more to go fight William Skull in May in Riyadh. And that's why he's doing it. And instead, and by the way, it's a brilliant business move on his part. He went from a 3-fight deal to a 4-fight deal. God bless. And he's going to beat William Skull. And now the Crawford fight is going to be for undisputed gold. Tremendous business on his part, but don't tell me that he had no intention of fighting Jake. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah, Canelo at this stage of his career is not just a very good boxer. As you say, he's a very good businessman. Like, I remember watching Canelo's interview with Sway, and he spoke about sort of his business acumen when it comes to boxing. Like, he makes this amount of money from every fight, and I think he said he takes 80% of every sort of profit or revenue share. He's about his money. He's about his money. He would have got the call from MVP, Nikisa, Jake Paul, whoever, and they would have said, okay, potentially this is the check for fighting me. And he would have said, what? Give me that check right now. He's about the money. And he maybe would have continued and had the Crawford fight, but he was really going to fight Jake Paul. I don't believe for a second that Canelo didn't entertain that. I don't believe for a second. All of a sudden, as we've said, Turkey's come, 4-fight deal, William Skull, Crawford, big bag, and then basically you have your pick of what you want to do after. So, again, that's my biggest takeaway from everything. The 96 hours were crazy, so many turns, so many twists, but my biggest takeaway was Canelo Alvarez, the pound-for-pound great, one of the all-time greats of the sport, the best 168-pounder in the last decade, was going to fight Jake Paul. And I find that wild and crazy. It was going to happen.
Okay, now here's the other thing that I also find very interesting as well. And you tell me your thoughts on this. Canelo Alvarez fights Jake Paul on a massive platform, whether it's pay-per-view or Netflix, and he beats the brakes off of him, right? And he says, "I did it for boxing, and now I'm going to fight the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world." Doesn't that make the Crawford fight way bigger than him fighting in Riyadh in May? You know what I mean? Like, they didn't want him to do a deal with Jake Paul because there's a personal rivalry there. They don't like Jake Paul. Turkey, to his credit, says he doesn't like that kind of boxing. And I do believe TKO, Dana White, their influence has been involved in all of this as well. And they don't like Jake Paul and his team. And that's business. You got to deal with that. You have people that are on your side and who aren't. But if you're trying to build to the Crawford fight and make that as big as possible, can we all just at least acknowledge that way more people would be talking about Canelo Alvarez, people who are my kids' age, right? They will know who he is. They will learn about him. And that will only make the Crawford fight bigger. MVP's side, they were saying, we don't care if you fight Crawford. And we think that it'll only make the Crawford fight bigger. The Riyadh side didn't want him to fight Jake because they thought that maybe him fighting Jake would kind of like would sour the Crawford fight. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it only would have made the Crawford fight bigger.
I think it makes it bigger in terms of eyes on Canelo. Although Canelo has so many eyeballs on him, he's the biggest star in boxing. I don't know. I almost feel like you fight Jake Paul. I almost want a crescendo, if you like, to Crawford. I almost feel like you fight Jake Paul. It's so big. Unfortunately, and I know a lot of fight fans are not going to like this, the Crawford fight is smaller. It's smaller in terms of eyeballs. It is. Crawford Canelo is smaller than Jake Paul Canelo. So I almost like the idea of building up to Crawford. You beat Skull, and yes, it's not a big fight, I agree. You beat Skull, you become undisputed, and now all of a sudden, there's a chance of history being made with Crawford attempting to become the first free weight undisputed champion. So I don't mind the undisputed fight, which is a formality, no disrespect to William Skull, and then you go to Crawford, and it's undisputed, and then Crawford has a chance to become undisputed. I like that story as opposed to, yes, more eyeballs with Jake Paul, but as opposed to him fighting Jake Paul, then Crawford. I almost feel like Jake Paul it overshadows Crawford a bit. And that's what I don't like. Whereas with the Williams Skull, we're all waiting now and itching for it to be Crawford, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I get that. I just think the spotlight would be so great on him. He's in the ring afterwards and he says, I'm coming for a Crawford next. Let me offer
You know what the issue is? You know what the issue is? Jake Paul will then go and will say, my fight's bigger. You know what Jake Paul's like. And remember, we're building this as boxing fans, big boxing fans, as Crawford Canelo is the biggest thing of 2025. Mm-hmm. Jake Paul, as he's been doing with the Mike Tyson thing, will always say, yeah, it ain't. Yeah, you beat me, but with all due respect, we had the biggest fight of 2025. You versus Crawford Canelo is the second or the third biggest. I had the biggest fight. And I think boxing fans don't want that. They want to say Crawford Canelo is the biggest thing. All of a sudden, it will be Jake Paul Canelo as being the biggest thing. So I don't mind all the spotlight being on September.
No, I get it. I get what
he
you're saying.
would troll for ages. Yeah.
Let me offer this. Crawford Canelo is gigantic, right? It as of right now, unless something else comes out of nowhere, it's the biggest fight of 2025. You're 100% right. If it's so big, why risk having a fight in May? And I know William Scullin isn't on his level, but he's a fighter and things can happen in fights. You can break your hand, you can roll your ankle, you could twist a knee. Things have happened in the build up to a fight and in the fight itself. You could break an orbital, you could get cut, God knows what. If it's that big, fair play to Crawford. He's like, I'm sitting out. I'm just going to get ready and I got to get bigger and bulk up and I understand that. But does it not give you any type, I'm an anxious guy. I get nervous about these things. Let's compare it to the UFC. If the UFC was going to announce John Jones versus Tom Aspinall in August, John ain't fighting someone else in March. You gear up to the big one. Is it not playing with fire just a little bit to fight someone before the mega fight? If they announce today that it's Crawford in September for Canelo, everyone goes gaga. Why do we need the one in May?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we've seen this before with Riyadh season as well. I remember Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker. It was all set for Deontay Wilder to fight AJ. All of a sudden, Joseph Parker put an X in that straight away. So I don't like the idea of rolling the dice. But this is Canelo for the last decade has given us 2 fights a year. That's what he likes to do. That's obviously how he stays in shape. That's how he stays sharp and how he stays ready. Although Crawford has said, I'm sitting it out until September, Crawford only fights once a year. So this is normal for Crawford. That's all he's been doing since 2019, I believe. It's just 1 fight a year. So for Crawford, it might actually be strange to fight twice a year. Whereas for Canelo, that's just what he does. It's what he does, and I think that's what he needs to get ready for Crawford. He wouldn't want to sit on the fence for 12
Yeah.
months and then go into a Crawford fight where Crawford's kind of used to doing it.